I want to welcome everybody to Kiwanis Hall here at the Performing Arts Center. We want to recognize our members, their guests, and all the veterans for today's Patriots Day celebration. At this time, I would like to introduce our program manager for today and club member and United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Jerry Kuntz. Jerry.
Thank you, Brett, and a warm welcome to all our veteran guests and their spouses. We appreciate everyone coming out for this wonderful program that Kiwanis is so generously doing for us year after year. We will now begin with the color guard in just a minute to actually present the colors, but I want to introduce them as they come in. We're honored to have the U.S. Navy Sea Cadet Corps Maritime Eagles Division of Sarasota and Manatee Counties. The color guard members are Seaman Holly Carflay, Seaman Recruit Mamadou Thean, Seaman Apprentice David DeHart, and Able Cadet Brendan Pomebo. They are accompanied by Chief Warrant Officer Dennis Turner and Instructor Dawn Pomebo. Color guard, please present the colors. Everyone rise. We will now have our national anthem. Leading us is Kiwanis past President Janine Amick. In the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color guard, please retire the colors. Let's give the Sea Cadets a big round of applause. Please be seated. I want to just take a minute to introduce some of our guests here today. First of all, our guest speaker, U.S. Navy Commander retired Brad Smith and his lovely wife Kirsten. Welcome. Command Chief Master Sergeant, U.S. Air Force retired Carl Hunsinger. Carl is the chairman of our Manatee County Veterans Council. Chief Warrant Officer, U.S. Army retired Don Courtney, past chairman of the Manatee County Veterans Council. We have Lee Washington, Marine Corps veteran, who is our Manatee County Services Officer. And a special guest we have today is Marine Corps veteran Ted Smith. Ted is the president of the Sarasota County Veterans Commission and also a member of our Manatee County Veterans Council. At this time, I will give you some information about our guest speaker, who we're truly honored to have. Brad Smith started flying lessons at the age of 15 and obtained his private license prior to enlisting in the Navy in 1961. He was later selected by the Navy Cadet Flight Training and received his wings and commission in 1964. After further weapons and aircraft carrier training, he was assigned to Jet Attack Squadron VA-76 and immediately went to sea on aircraft carriers Roosevelt, America, and Enterprise. In October 1965, he departed for Southeast Asia on the USS Enterprise, arriving off the coast of South Vietnam in late November 1965. On March 25, 1966, while on his 80th mission, Brad was shot down over North Vietnam in the vicinity of the city of Vinh. He was held prisoner of war from that date until his release on February 13, 1973, just 2.5 weeks short of 7 years in captivity. After his repatriation and flight refresher training, Brad was one of the small numbers of Navy pilots returning to fleet combat squadrons. From 1974 through 1981, he served 3 A-7 squadron tours on aircraft carriers. From 1974 to 77, he served on the USS Saratoga, seeing duty off the coast of Lebanon, and from 1979 to 1981 on the USS Coral Sea in the Indian Ocean during the ill-fated attempt to rescue the Iran hostages. From 1981 to 1985, Brad served as aircraft maintenance officer and as a weapons system test pilot at the Pacific Missile Test Center, Port Mugu, California. Flight test projects including the firing test of the Tomahawk and Harpoon cruise missiles, the advanced Walleye, Phoenix laser guided weapons, and the development of airborne laser systems. Brad is qualified as a test pilot, instructor pilot, instrument check and proficiency check pilot in single and multiple engine, jet, and propeller aircraft. His decorations include 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, the Meritorious Service Medal, 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, 5 Air Medals, and the Navy Commendation Medal. Upon retirement from the Navy in 1985, Brad was employed by Lear Sigler, a defense contractor in the aerospace field, and attained senior management level positions. After leaving Lear Sigler in 1991, Brad relocated with his wife Kirsten to Bradenton, Florida. He started a stained glass business and turned a passionate hobby into a business. He retired from the stained glass business in 2005. Brad is a graduate of the University of North Florida with a degree in business. He has built and currently enjoys flying a 1930 British Tiger Moth and is now in the process of building another airplane, a RV-6. Brad and Kirsten have been married over 43 years. They spend a lot of time with their daughter Connie and their 4 grandchildren and other family members who live close by. Please join me in giving a warm Kiwanis welcome to our guest speaker, Commander Brad Smith.
Thank you, Jerry. I think I'll quit while I'm ahead. Actually, it's nice to see all of you people. It looks like a huge turnout today. I've got my brain and my eyes with me, so I'm ready to go. Rock and roll, as they used to say in Vietnam. Today I want to give you a short, brief snapshot of how I and in North Vietnam, 570 Navy, Air Force, Marines, and a few CIA, Air America guys snuck in, how we were able to survive under horrible conditions, how we were able to keep ourselves and our fellow prisoners alive, many of whom were wounded during that period of time or in their ejection from their aircraft. How we were able to maintain, under all these conditions, which I'll talk about briefly, our military unity and discipline, and how we resisted the enemy, our captors, who would have loved nothing better to have probably killed every one of us individually. Our motto that we had during that period of time, which we developed there actually, was return with honor. That was our driving factor during our entire period of time. We had some people, obviously, that were there longer than I, and some very short, but that was our motto, return with honor. Before I go any further, we did have roughly 570 in North Vietnam. There were another 100 or so POWs in South Vietnam. I'm not sure how their conditions were, but I would guess that they were worse than even ours were. And there were about 100 prisoners taken who died in captivity. So roughly 800 and some folks taken totally. I can sum up the 7 years I spent there, 6 years, 11 months, in 3 words. And they all start with B. Brutal beyond belief. I served 24 years in the Navy, and many of those years, almost all of them, were as an aircraft pilot, flying off aircraft carriers, flying jet attack and fighter aircraft. During that period of time, I was in some of the finest squadrons in the Navy. Won all the awards, we had great officers, we had great people, all of our maintenance crews, and just top of the line. But as great as all those squadrons were and those people, I have to say that those folks I served with, all those different branches of service, Navy, Marines, Air Force, you name it, in Vietnam, by far, were the strongest, toughest, most patriotic, compassionate, professional people I ever served with, ever. Our motto was return with honor. I'll give you a little bit of my own personal experience, and I want to throw in a general comments as we go along, and this is my personal experience. Probably everyone that was there had somewhat similar experiences, maybe a different scenario, but we pretty much had the same routine. I was shot down, as Jerry mentioned, on my 80th mission. I was hit over a target in South Vietnam. I was just rolling in on that target with my single-seat jet aircraft, got hit at about 8,000 to 10,000 feet, blew the tail off the airplane. The airplane was already in a dive, the speed was increasing, the airplane was on fire and spinning toward the ground. I remember peeking out one side of the cockpit, and the speed was reaching 600 miles an hour. The airplane was in approximately a 70-degree dive towards the ground. I had my hand up on the bomb jettison handle, trying to get the bombs off of the airplane, so hopefully with trim I could get the nose up. I was only off the coast about 5 miles. If I could get the airplane turned around, get out over the water, eject, and maybe be picked up by our folks. Well, it wasn't to be. As I say, 600 miles an hour, that steep a dive, you cover a lot of territory in a real hurry. I remember taking that hand off of the bomb release handle, and I remember reaching for the ejection seat handle, which was between your knees. There's also one above your head. And I remember crystal clear, it was probably a tenth of a second or less, saying to myself, because I could see how low I was, it's too late to get out. I don't remember ejecting. I don't remember anything about it. When I went out 600 miles an hour, whatever it was, tore my helmet off, my mask off, my pistol went one way, came up, sliced my throat open, and I never woke up as far as getting my eyes open. I remember feeling a jolt, and immediately, thousandths of a second later, I was 10 feet underwater. I landed in a river. Our target was a bridge. Thank God. I remember laying there and seeing the light filter down through the water. We Navy guys are trained to get out of our harnesses and parachutes immediately because we always have the risk of going over the side of the ship, which I did. Popped up. I was in the middle of a river about a mile wide. 7 o'clock in the morning, the dogs were barking, the charcoal fires were going, and here I was. Pulled out my survival radio, tried to get in touch with the rest of my flight, 3 other airplanes. The radio was broken. It goes in the water. A few minutes later, they put a boat out from either side of the river banks. And the one from the south side got there first, and they stopped about from here to the door from me. By that time, I had gotten rid of my .38. I didn't figure I was going to shoot my way out of North Vietnam against a bunch of guys with AK-47s, so I got rid of that, got rid of the ammo, the radio, the whole thing. They stopped. I had my hands up. Of course, I'm like this in the water. We looked at each other for probably, it seemed like a long time. I don't remember being afraid. I'm sure, in shock. But just looking back on it, I think I got about a quarter of a swing in the parachute before I hit the water unconscious. So, a second or less, I wouldn't have been here talking to you at all. But anyway, they pulled me in, and 6 guys, as I mentioned, in black pajamas, AK-47s. I remember the guy in the front had his leg up on the edge of the boat, and his face was all scarred up, and I figured, well, he'd been in the war somewhere. He's not going to be real happy with me. They pulled me ashore, took all my gear except my flight suit, my boots, everything. Never saw him again, and I spent the rest of that day with my arms wired behind my back in this village. Well, I'm going to kind of go as quickly as I can here so we can get in a little bit more. That night, they started to move me. By that time, my knee was about the size of a cantaloupe, and I'd torn all the muscles out of my neck during the ejection, so wherever my head was, I couldn't move it, and have my arms wired behind my back. I'd have to move my head if I wanted to move it. So we started marching. Nothing moves in the day in Vietnam. Everything moves at night. So they'd throw me on the back of a truck, but most often I walked barefoot. My tender little toes were not used to those rice paddies in Vietnam. We walked. Occasionally they'd throw me in the bottom of a boat, throw me on the back of a truck, and of course I'm blindfolded and handcuffed or wired, arms wired behind my back the whole time. Well, during the daytime, if we were in a village, they'd march you through the village or march me through the village, and the natives had a chance to throw stones, beat me with clubs or whatever it may be. Every once in a while, somebody'd come up with a pistol and put it to your head, and you never knew whether it was for real or not, or put you up against a wall with a firing squad. So 4 days of this went on, and I was in this little village, and I'll tell you this for a particular reason. In this little village, and during the day, I was kept in a little dugout in the ground and it had logs on top of it. It's about 5 feet deep. One afternoon, the guard pulled me out, and here's an elderly Vietnamese gentleman. Spoke French. I did at that time, at least some of it. And he started asking me questions. You know, where are you from? What ship are you off of? And I kept giving him the name, rank, serial number, date of birth type thing. And he didn't get angry, but the guard was getting really upset, really angry. Well, the old man hung around for about half an hour, 45 minutes, and off he went. And the guard I figured, I am really going to get it now. Well, before the old man left, the guard had run into the woods or jungle there, grabbed a club about 2 inches in diameter, about 4 feet long, and he was going to beat it out of me. The old man said, no, don't do that. I told him. So the old man left. The guard is there now, and I figured I am really going to get it now. The guard came up behind me, and my arms are wired, and the hole is down there for the trench. He comes up and pushes me from the back. I lined in the hole on my face, and then arms behind me, and I heard that bolt on that AK-47 go back. I remember thinking to myself, this is it, baby. Yeah, obviously it wasn't. He went off and screaming and yelling. I paid for it later with some other things, but at that point in time, I decided I was going to set goals. I'd been there 4 days. I figured if I can last 4 days, I can last 4 more days. So Second World War was 4 years long. And I set a goal, 4 days, 4 weeks, 4 months. And as long as I was there, I always set a goal out there in front of me. I can last that long. And throughout the years I was there, I always set a goal a year or so out there. I arrived in Hanoi after a week on the road, beaten and clubbed and not much to eat and very little water. While there, I remember I arrived at probably 2 o'clock in the morning in the back of a truck, and it was raining. And I remember peeking underneath my blindfold, and I could see Maison Centrale, which means the central house. It was the central prison. This was Wallow. I had arrived, the Hanoi Hilton. I spent a week there in a room called the Green Room, which was a torture room, to put it in a nice, polite way. Wound up having both shoulders separated, actually dislocated due to torture with ropes. And from there, I didn't know. I thought I was the only guy alive in North Vietnam. I didn't hear anything, didn't see anybody, nobody told me anything. Later found out I was about the 60th prisoner to be taken. While there, I was thrown in what we called Heartbreak Hotel. If you can imagine a dungeon from back 200 or 300 years ago, old steel doors, peeling concrete. They threw me in there by myself. Had a little pad on each side about 6 feet long, rusty handlebars on one end and rusty leg irons on the other end, and this was Heartbreak Hotel. While there, I'd been there about a half a day or so, I heard this voice, "Hey, you American?" And it was another prisoner down the way. It was an Air Force officer. He said, "Look at the wall, memorize it." So I looked at it, and here carved in the wall where was a block, 5 letters across, 5 rows, and 5 letters. This was our tap code that we used to be able to communicate throughout the prison for the next period of time. We had other methods, but this was one of them. Tap code, A, B, C, D, E, top line, on and on and on. So if you wanted to say hi, second line, third word, third letter. H, H-I, hi. We used that throughout 2-foot concrete walls. You could do that. It was our main means of communication, which was one of the most important things that we had to do to be able to keep in touch with people, to become organized against the Vietnamese. From there, I went to a camp called Briar Patch, to the zoo. I was there about 6 weeks in solitary confinement. There were 2 guys on the other side of me. On one side, it was in a single cell. And finally, they threw in another guy, Charlie Baldock, who had been off the same carrier, the Enterprise, different squadron. Well, Charlie and I were young guys full of piss and vinegar, and we ignored the camp regulations, so to speak. Well, we did a lot of yucking and having a good time, which usually resulted in us getting a beating every day for the heck of it. But one of the things they wanted us to do when the guards came to the door was when they left, we were supposed to bow, okay? Well, Charlie and I were not really into bowing. So we had about every day we got slapped around for that, not doing that. Finally, we decided, well, we'll do something to compromise. We'd nod our head and we'd give them the middle finger salute. They asked what that meant. And we said, well, it's just a standard American greeting, it just means, Well, that went on for a couple of years till Jane Fonda came over and told them what it really meant. And we paid for it, but it was worth it for 2 years. On and on. I'm going to skip forward on a few things here just because I want to stay within some period of time. I went from there to a camp called the Briar Patch. And the Briar Patch really was one. Out in the country, no water, no electricity. The only source of water in the place was a well. And if you were not being tortured in cuffs or whatever it may be, about once every 2 or 3 weeks, they'd take you down to the well and you could draw a bucket of water and pour it over your head. That was it. Everybody had a beard. I was living with Charlie Baldock in a 2-man cell. It was the roughest camp I was ever in. As I said, no water, no electricity. Cramped up in a little cell. It was 6 feet wide, about 7 feet long. And the guards were allowed to beat on you anytime they wanted to. It was a lot of torture. I figured the chances of surviving Briar Patch were about 50-50. I remember one time in October, I'd been shot down in March, as was mentioned, on October. We had a little box, little cement thing outside our cell, which was, we had a steel plate that you dunked down in there to wash it off, if you will. And it was a quiet, cool morning in October. And I looked down in this vat, and I just froze. Looking back at me was this face that looked like it just came out of Dachau or one of the concentration camps. I had lost, when I was shot down, I probably weighed 175 pounds, good physical condition. I probably weighed 115 pounds at that time. So I'd lost 60 pounds in 6 months. One encounter I had while I was there was with the camp commander of the Briar Patch, and his name was Frenchie. At least that's what we called him. I went in for an interrogation after I'd been there about 4 months, I guess, or so, and Frenchie spoke quite good English. Thank you. Anyway, I have an interrogation with Frenchie, and I've got this guard right behind me with a bayonet tickling my ribs. So Frenchie spent the next 4 hours trying to convince me that I should write a letter to the troops in the South and to the people in the United States. It was an illegal, immoral war and all that kind of stuff. Well, it went on and went on and went on and went on. And finally, Frenchie was wearing out, and I was already worn out. And I knew when you went in for one of these interrogations, the best you could hope for was you were going to get the crap beat out of you, and the worst was going to be torture. So I kept telling Frenchie, I can't do that. I won't do it. I can't do it. I won't do it. And finally, Frenchie stood up. He had a desk. I was sitting on a little concrete block. Came around the desk, took his watch off, laid it on the edge of the desk, and went ballistic. He said, I was the prison camp commander when we had Japanese prisoners during World War II. We could get them to do anything we wanted to. They would do whatever. I was the camp commander of the French during the French Indochina War, the French prisoners. We could make them do anything, they would do anything. And with that, he reached over and slapped me as hard as he could, right alongside my head, knocked me off the stool, and screamed, "You Americans are the most stupid people in the world. We can't get you to do anything." And yeah, it went downhill from there. But it was the only time in my life I was ever proud to be called stupid. I paid for it. Next door was a torture chamber. I wound up getting my arms wired behind my back. They put these old French handcuffs up on your arms here. Put your arms way up behind you, and as your arm muscles wear out, your hands come down and it cuts into your arms, turns your arms blue, then black, and your fingers retract. It was painful, I can tell you that, and thank God I lived with Charlie Baldock because I couldn't move my arms for a couple of months after that. But anyway, I want you to consider this. You wake up in a cell in a foreign country. Everything you had is gone. You're wearing a set of rags. You got nothing. You have to worry about your car, your kids, your house, your yard, no, nothing. All you got is you. You got a pair of rags on and maybe a pair of flip-flops. That's what you got to survive. There's nothing to read. There's no books. There's no TV. There's no newspapers, no nothing. It's you and your brain. And how are you going to survive? You have to make that decision every morning. You have to make a decision that you are going to live and that you are going to do everything in your power that is moral, legal, whatever it may be, but you are going to live. You're going to eat garbage. I've eaten rats. I've eaten monkeys. I've eaten every bug that ever crawled across my plate. I've eaten chicken heads, chicken feet, you name it, I've eaten it. And even so, lost tremendous amounts of weight. But you eat it because it has protein in it. You learn to live with pain. We had no doctors. We had no medication. If you're injured, suck it up. That's about it. You're going to have to get rawhide tough. And you did. There were times when I was there that if I figured if I could take two of those little buggers with me, I might consider giving up my life. The situation never developed. But you have to, again, set goals. Keep your mind working. We lost 8 guys over there that died in the prison camps in North Vietnam. And why? They lost their minds, either due to torture or whatever, but they never came home. And the Vietnamese were never going to release them in that condition. A lot of people have told me they couldn't survive under that situation. And I'll tell you, you can. When it gets down to the basics, live or not live, you'll see what you're made out of. And I think probably everyone in this room would live. Living as an individual prisoner of war is one thing, but how did we help others survive? The main thing I mentioned, helping others survive. Through communications, keeping in touch with everybody, making sure that you at least had some contact with every prisoner in that camp, maybe not individually, but somebody was communicating. Not only did it help us know what the Vietnamese were after, what they were interrogating about, but just knowing that there was somebody besides you there that was concerned about you. Boost people's spirits, communicate, plan, escape committees, whatever it may be. But compassion. All we had was each other. The second part, as I mentioned, is taking care of your fellow prisoners. We had guys that had severe injuries from ejections or battle damage or were wounded in some fashion. As I mentioned, there was very little to no medical care. I remember staying up all night. Two other cellmates of mine, the fourth guy, I don't know why he was there, but he had asthma. We had to stay up all night and give him CPR, breathe for him, keep him going, keep him alive. He's still alive today. We had guys with severe sciatic nerve damage, back damage. Couldn't do anything for them except sit there, massage their legs, their backs, or whatever it may be. I'm glad everyone's eaten. Has everybody finished? We had two guys. This is about the 5th year I was there. And I apologize, Jerry, I'm running over here, but I'm trying to. About the 5th year I was there, we had two guys that had been there as long as I had. And by now we were living in larger and larger cells just because there were more of us. Well, these two guys said, that's it. We quit. We're not going to do this anymore. We gave up. The hell with it. And the rest of us said, not so fast. We're not going to let you guys die on our watch. Well, they quit eating. They wouldn't eat. And one guy was skinnier than a fence post to start with, and the other guy wasn't much better. They just quit eating. So about 6 of us got together and we said, okay, you're going to do it the easy way or the hard way, but you're going to eat. Now, food comes, 6 of us get them, one at a time, throw them on the ground, sit on them. Put the food in their mouth. Throw it up, gather it up, goes right back in the same hole. And we're going to keep doing this till you swallow it. Well, we did that. Those two guys are still walking around today. But that's tough love, as they say. The other factor, obviously, we talked about individual, we've talked about compassion for others, was our military duty. We looked like a bunch of ragtag nothings, long hair, beards, filthy, stinking people. But we were still military people. We had a military organization. Every cell had a senior guy. Every cell block had a senior officer. We lived and breathed by that. We were organized, and we ran our lives that way. We had escape committees, communication committees, et cetera, et cetera. And that was our duty, to resist the enemy as best we could. We only had one weapon, right there. We were unarmed, except for our minds. Didn't have any weapons. All we had was our minds and our will. We maintained our military discipline. We made the Vietnamese understand, and it took a while. You'll never get anything from any of us unless you torture us. And even then, you're not going to get anything that's going to be of any value to you. And every time you went to an interrogation, they knew, or they remembered, or I won't say remember, they knew by that time you weren't going to give them anything. They wanted propaganda. By that time, yeah, maybe the first 6 months they wanted military information, but I mean, that's time sensitive. All they wanted at that time was propaganda. Write a letter, do this, talk to Jane Fonda or whoever, whatever. But no, we're not going to do that. And they knew it. So if it's worth it to you to torture, we couldn't stop it. But that was our military part of our prisoner of war thing. Again, our whole driving thing was return with honor. And I think I'll quit at that point in time since I'm running over. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice that you made on behalf of all of us. You're greatly appreciated, and we can never repay you or thank you enough for all that you went through. At this time, I'd like to introduce Chief Warrant Officer of U.S. Army Retired Don Courtney. Many who served our nation in wartime became prisoners of war, as we just heard from Commander Smith, or are still unaccounted for and missing in action. In front of the room is a display which represents our POWs and MIAs. It is my pleasure to introduce Don Courtney, a former Manatee County Veteran of the Year and past chairman of the Manatee County Veterans Council, who will describe the meaning and significance of the display.
Thank you, Jerry. The table is for one who cannot be with us today. It is symbolic of American prisoners of war and those still missing in action. The single chair represents our POWs, MIA's loneliness, and is facing away from us to signify an unknown face representing each of them. The black napkin stands for the emptiness that their absence has left in the hearts of families and friends who remember and miss them. The overturned glass and plate remind us that they cannot be with us today. The red rose and ribbon symbolize the sacrifices and hardships endured by them and their love of the country that led them to such sacrifices. The white tablecloth and vase stand for the hope that we may someday have our POWs and MIAs back with us. The Bible is for faith, or whatever form that may be for each of us, which sustains our missing warriors and their loved ones through the immense difficulties that they are enduring. The yellow candle and ribbon remind us that we must never abandon our work for their return and complete accounting of our missing countrymen, and that we must never forget them. Please join me in a moment of silent prayer for our POWs and MIAs and their families. Thank you. I'd like to recognize everybody that was Purple Heart recipient. Please stand, if you're able. Thank you. I'd also like to honor all the Manatee County Veterans of the Year that are here. Please stand. At this time, we're going to play the service songs, and I'd like you to stand as your service is played, and also the spouses, because you serve just as much as the military person. United States Army. United States Marine Corps. United States Navy. United States Air Force. United States Coast Guard. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Don, and a big thank you to our veterans and your spouses for your service to our country. I would now like to introduce the chairman of the Manatee County Veterans Council, Command Chief Master Sergeant Carl Hunsinger, U.S. Air Force retired.
One more round of applause for our guest speaker today. That was amazing. And that, my friends, I tell you, that's Americanism. When you go around, you watch television, you go around the county, you go around the state and around the country. We know, we feel, we breathe Americanism, and the Kiwanis Club has done amazing things to support us here, right here in Manatee County. It's a great pleasure to publicly announce the first time that Kiwanis Hickson Fellow and Station Manager of Manatee County Education Television, Charles Clapsaddle, is the Manatee County Non-Veteran or the Civilian of the Year recipient for 2017. Give him a round of applause, please. And he's standing right there at the camera. He's everywhere. Charles has done so much in our community to support our veterans. He's very deserving of this prestigious recognition. In addition to Charles's selection, our other two community winners are Brian Jacobs, who is the Colonel Frederick J. Graves Veteran of the Year recipient for this year, and Mary Silcox as the Auxiliary of the Year recipient out of the VFW in Palmetto. Let's give them a round of applause as well. And I mentioned the late Colonel Frederick J. Graves. We have with us his widow, with us today, Norma. Thank you, Norma. On behalf of the Manatee County Veterans Council, I extend a sincere thank you to the Kiwanis Club of Bradenton for your generous hosting of this event for us and the sponsorship of today's luncheon, and for your generous contribution to support our Veterans Day services and our parade this year. We appreciate that. Also, on behalf of the Veterans Council and all veterans of Manatee County, I cordially invite each and every one of you to attend Veterans Day this Saturday, November 11th. On the 11th is the start of our ceremony, and we will be in Palmetto at Sutton Park and Lamb Park. So if you are in a parade, that starting time, if you're in the parade, it'll be 9 in the morning, but show up at 11 for the ceremony and the start of the parade, and we will have a band to follow that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl. Before we turn today's program back to President-elect Brett Pollock, we offer a big thank you to the U.S. Navy Sea Cadets Color Guard, our veteran guests and spouses. Charles Clapsaddle, congratulations, Charles. Command Chief Master Sergeant Carl Hunsinger, our guest speaker, Commander Brad Smith. And to echo Carl's remarks, especially to the Kiwanis Club of Bradenton for very generously sponsoring and hosting today's luncheon in honor of our military veterans, and for your very generous support of our annual Veterans Day Parade. I will now ask Kiwanis past president, Janine Amick, who will now lead us in singing God Bless America.
Please stand and join me.
You may be seated. On behalf of the Bradenton Kiwanis Club, we appreciate you attending today. This is one of the special days we have. Look at this room. Again, this is what we do for our veterans, and we celebrate it with our Patriots Day. As we celebrate Veterans Day on Saturday, let us always remember those who have served, especially those who have sacrificed or laid down their lives for us. May we never forget. We are adjourned.